So why hybrid events? First, let's talk just a little bit about this concept of hybrid. We've been doing hybrid at ArcZone for a long time. Like I said, we used to do in-person training, in-person events. Our space, while great, is very limited capacity. So we did a lot of simulcasting and live streaming and supporting a virtual audience. For years, we've been doing that. And now hybrid's a very hot topic, of course, because of COVID, health concerns. But really, the hybrid model is great because it really lets you stay connected and it lets you meet your people where they are. Meeting them where they are, that may be where they are health-wise or with their health concerns. It may mean meeting them where they are geographically, maybe travel, or even maybe the timing of some of your events is hard for people. So having a hybrid option. Also the expense, sometimes nonprofits, they throw very cool galas and different large events, and maybe there's some people who can't quite afford that, and maybe there's a hybrid option that's free or reduced cost or whatever. So it's kind of all about meeting your audience where they are, and providing a good in-person and a good virtual option all wrapped in the same event. And so that's kind of what we've landed on and started to call hybrid events. So I'll switch the poll here. Thanks for answering that poll. It looks like some of you have gone to hybrid events already, but as virtual attendees. So that's interesting. So I hope that was a good experience for you. So let me switch this poll up. We'll go to the next one here. So the first part we'll kind of get into is event considerations, a little bit in general on how to structure these events, and then a lot more details going in about, different aspects of the hybrid and the in-person world and how you blend those together. So in general, the big consideration, of course, is your purpose. The event purpose is really the big one. And the most common things nonprofits are having events to accomplish is, of course, staying connected to their community. It could be your donor community. It could be the community of people you serve. It could be the local business community. Raising funds, of course, is huge. Raising funds is a big one. Many times, annual galas or different fundraising events are a key part of nonprofits fundraising in their operating budget. And driving action is a big one too. Events can really drive a lot of actions, even beyond donating or volunteering or signing up for something or something else. Whenever you have a big ask and you want to motivate and move your community to do certain actions, events are a really, really great thing. So determining the main event purpose is going to affect all the factors. It will really affect everything and how you construct a hybrid model. So definitely think about that. And remember that some things are hard to translate. Some things are very hard to translate from the real space to the virtual space. And on the other side of the coin, some things in the virtual world actually work a lot better. In fact, we've sort of employed some virtual event concepts in live events for years, for a long, long time, mainly having to do with integrating pre-recorded content into live events to save time or to construct a more crafted kind of experience. So those are some things to think about. It looks like, oh, 89% of you have had to postpone or cancel an event. Unfortunately, that is extremely common, and that's been a big bummer for our nonprofit friends. So hopefully some of this information you can use today and not have to do that again. So when it comes to the hybrid model, there's kind of three main types of hybrids we usually talk about. So we'll go through these first. The first one is what I kind of call post-live. So post-live meaning that you're having a live event, you're going to be recording and capturing a lot of that content, and you're going to be using that later in a hybrid or a virtual space. So basically, the virtual and the live may not be happening exactly at the same time, but you're going to be doing a live event, capturing that information to be able to use later in a virtual space. So this is common for maybe panel discussions that have some valuable content, and actually can be very common for sort of education summits and conferences, things where people are having continuing education and they're going to keep that content online anyways for a certain period of time to people, or there may be a test or testing involved. They want to retake tests. Sometimes press events. that are done and they're videotaped and they're used later. So that's kind of the post live model. There's partial hybrid, and there's a lot of ways to do things partially hybrid. It seems like the most common partial hybrid model is that you've already been creating a whole bunch of pre-recorded crafted content for the live version, and you basically play those at the same time. So you may not be streaming or simulcasting the entire live experience, but what you're doing is those components that are pre-recorded, you're showing them to both an in-person audience and a virtual audience at the same time. So that can be good for some kinds of fundraisers. Sometimes award shows do that, or sometimes summits or things that may be multiple days. And the in-person thing has a lot of activities to do, but a lot of the content is pre-recorded, so you can show that to both audiences. And there's really the full hybrid model. Full hybrid meaning you're really trying to provide as much of the identical experience to both in-person and virtual attendees. So that's really striving to have a very balanced approach where the in-person audience and the virtual audience neither feel like they're missing out, right? They don't wish, oh, I wish I was there, or oh, I wish I hadn't come, I wish I was virtual. It's kind of a very similar experience. And this is what most of my clients are trying to achieve. That's their goal. So this is really good for galas. It's good for fundraisers, especially fundraisers where you have auctions, because really post-event, most of the time auctions don't stay open for days and days. It's actually more common they start early. They open auctions a day before the event. So the full hybrid's a great model for that, where you want to be able to have in-person and virtual people bidding on the same items. It's good for entertainment type events or concerts or music or different types of things. So these are kind of the three models that we're most typically seeing. So let's talk about how you meld sort of the in-person virtual world. So really the hybrid, when we're talking about hybrid, we're talking about leveraging some things from virtual events, some of those concepts and methods. And then we're also talking about bringing some things from the in-person experience and translating those to virtual, right? So we're kind of going both ways. So usually with hybrid, the most common virtual event features that you're going to be leveraging is sort of pre-recorded content. So you're probably going to have a lot of live in-person things, but typically if you have a good venue, they're going to have large projector screens and speakers, and you can leverage some of that pre-recorded things. And you may have pre-recorded components for a whole variety of reasons. Very common reason is it can be very high impact. Most people aren't super great at speaking, public speaking at events, and they may stumble on their words or something. So say you're going to be showing your organization's impact during your event, you may want to film and make a little featurette with one of your program participants that really shows how you're helping them and all that kind of thing. And that can be very high impact when it's pre-recorded. It can be well crafted. Even for award shows, many times we are pre-filming sort of nomination and different things. And people just accept the award, but they don't give a speech. Their kind of comments may be pre-recorded, again, to make it well crafted, to make the story really crafted. And it has better show flow, right? If someone gives a 10-minute acceptance speech, it may mess with your flow, or if you're talking with someone who's talking about your programs and maybe they get on tangents, you can control the flow of your program better when you have some pre-recorded things. It's also very nice for people who can't be there. So a really awesome thing that happened during this whole virtual event thing we've been doing for months and months and months now, like almost 2 years. These events and nonprofits have been able to get some really good guests, people who may not have been able to do their event otherwise if it was in person. So pre-recording things, you can bring different guests in that maybe they can't make it the day or they can't travel. And you can even bring people into your live event, of course, over Zoom sometimes. I'm sure you're seeing on even some of the late night talk shows that now they're back to having audiences and guests. Sometimes guests are still kind of zooming in, and they're on a screen. Another great thing is device-based interaction. And this has been a trend for a while, even at in-person events pre-COVID, is making the bidding of items, making donations, making different quick actions, signing up for things. All of those kinds of things can happen on a phone or in some kind of system, right? Making a device-based system for action. So that's really critical too for hybrid. Say you want people to be able to bid on a silent auction item, you want the virtual audience, the in-person audience to have access to all the same things. That's where your sort of bidding platform on a device really comes in, right? So the in-person people, they can look at the items, maybe you have them set up and kind of see them, but you're going to need some way for the virtual people to see them. So of course, if your bidding platform has great pictures and you can look at it on your phone, that works for both those audiences. Also centralizing information. A lot of virtual events kind of have these sort of one-page destinations where there's the giving and the funded need and the bidding on auctions and the program information and information about the organization and the video window right there where you're watching the virtual experience, kind of centralizing everything into one place. That can be great for hybrid and even for the in-person audience. Again, everyone is bringing a device usually to these events. So, leveraging that can be very helpful. On sort of the pre-recorded and mixing pre-recorded and live content, this was a virtual event we did. And this is an example of how powerful offering pre-recorded things can be. Although this event was virtual, these panels are eventually going to go back to hybrid. However, because they had this virtual model we developed for them, they were able to get guests like Shaquille O'Neal, Titus O'Neil, Justin Allen Page, just phenomenal guests to talk on their panels. And so no one realized this, but I had interviewed Shaquille O'Neal before this event happened. And we mixed in his pre-recorded content with live Zoom content and a live sort of panel moderator, mix it all together. People had no idea that, his work was done, like 2 weeks ahead of time. So that can still be done in the hybrid model. It can be done at your venue with a screen, a nice big screen and speakers. So the kind of blending of all these different types of content, pre-recorded, live, but remote, can be really cool for hybrid events. It opens up a lot of options. So some things about bringing the live program into the virtual world. Now we're talking about how things move that way. So the biggest thing, of course, is simulcasting, basically letting the virtual audience enjoy your entire in-person program by having the whole thing videoed and broadcasted at the same time in real time. So they call that live streaming. The old TV term is simulcasting, but that is a big thing. And we're going to talk more about that because that's the thing that technically and how it works and kind of the requirements, that's something that's probably the biggest struggle. Most of our nonprofit clients are very good at putting on the in-person events. They're good at that kind of stuff. And some of them are getting good at virtual too. But when you're doing both and you get into the simulcasting, it can be kind of tricky. So we'll talk more about that. Another thing bringing from the live world is having remote options for different things, having remote auctions or options for take home food and drink or take home cocktail kits. Maybe, people at your event are enjoying a signature cocktail. You can provide a pickup location for the ingredients, minus the alcohol, but, for something like that. A lot of people are providing special tickets. So the virtual ticket is maybe it's free or inexpensive, but if you pay the full option, maybe you can get some of the items and different things from the in-person event just as a take-home box, right? And usually we schedule that for the day of the event too. So it's kind of exciting. You get to your car and you go pick up all your items and you enjoy the program at home, but you have some take-home items. Another thing is participation. You really don't want your virtual audience to feel like they're sort of, left out. You want to offer them ways to participate. So of course we talked about the bidding, seeing the program, doing all those kinds of things on your mobile devices. But you can also, if you have a panel or audience interaction, of course, you can have a dedicated person to monitor that virtual space and take questions from the virtual audience. Or you could have, if you have, say, a pre-event social room or something in your venue where you have sort of VIP type stuff, you can provide a VIP area virtually too. Maybe it's in Zoom or a part of the website where you get access to that with a certain ticket. So those are some ways you can bring live in-person things into that virtual world. This is some example. We're doing these take-home party boxes for an event coming up. And this is an example of that. So there's all the information's online ahead of time. You can see when you're buying your ticket, oh, I also want to get, this cool take home beverage and food options. And so they're selling special tickets that have some of those real world perks, right? They're going to be watching at home, but they can still enjoy some nice snacks and food. So some things to keep in mind. Keep in mind when you're building your hybrid model and you're trying to figure out, what components you're going to do, is you really want to balance the features with the technical ability of your virtual audience. We're going to be focusing a lot on virtual audience sort of issues because that's, again, like I said, most nonprofits have gotten very good at in-person events, but the virtual space is a little tricky. So balance the features and technical ability of your audience very carefully. So you don't want to make it too hard to get into the chat room or too hard to view the program or too hard to bid or any of these things. Make all of the actions and interactivity you want in the virtual audience, make it as easy as possible to do and offer a lot of ways to engage in that virtual space. So support the virtual audience really well. You don't want to make them feel kind of, left out. So when you're picking your platform for the virtual component, that's going to be a big deal. How those are going to work together with your in-person things, and blending sort of technologies together is very common. Many times people are going to be using Zoom, but with also some virtual camera work or pre-recorded content, or they're kind of blend, things together. The ticketing may all be done through a ticketing system, but the event is watched over here or the bidding is done over here. So there's different, we've done some examples here. We've done some panel events. We've done, sort of large scale meetings where people attend these meetings in person, but there's also cameras and they can participate through Zoom. We're doing a lot of work with SDHCA, which is a nonprofit for nurses, and they're doing a lot of the post-live stuff where because of their organization and people really working with vulnerable communities of patients, they want to have people be able to come in person if that's okay. But if they're more patient-based, all of it's available online the next day, that kind of thing. So really think about your audience carefully. And some details about the virtual platform itself. Picking a virtual platform can be very tricky. So we talked about access to the platform in that virtual space. What are going to be the technical requirements? Does your audience, your ideal audience, do they have good internet computers, that kind of thing? How is the security and registration going to work? Are you able to, if it's a ticketed event, make sure that, people aren't sharing it, that it's only the people with tickets viewing that virtual area. And of course, keep in mind that interactivity, any e-commerce, making the e-commerce in that virtual space easy, and any integrations with anything else. Say, you send out a mailer or something else after your events to thank people for coming, make sure you can pull that attendee information from your virtual space. So some of the options, there's many options out there for virtual platforms. For the virtual platforms with really a lot of interactivity, or that hybrid experience, providing some back and forth between that in-person audience and virtual audience. Common ones are usually left to right: Cisco, WebEx, Zoom, Skype, or MS Teams. And these are kind of the ones with a lot of interactivity. If you're talking about less interactive, it's more like viewing it. Maybe it's a gala. You want to do a full hybrid gala with all the content simulcast. Then you may be looking at something like YouTube, or maybe something like Vimeo, where those platforms have a little bit of interaction. There's some ability to do a poll, or there's like kind of a general chat room, but that's mostly for viewing. So those are some of the platforms you could be considering. Keep in mind, really look into these platforms carefully, because you'd be surprised how expensive some of them get. It may be there's a limit on the length of the event or a limit on the number of attendees. Zoom out of the box doesn't support hundreds or thousands of attendees. It has additional licenses. If you want to say, have the virtual space for your hybrid event be in Zoom, if you have 500 people or 1,000 people, that is additional cost and licenses to support that.